We're so glad to have you here with us for this special luncheon session, featuring a conversation you won't want to miss. To help us kick things off, it's my pleasure to introduce a visionary leader in the world of intellectual property, Scott Frank, President and CEO of AT&T Intellectual Property LLC, and founder, chair, and president of the United States Intellectual Property Alliance. Please join me in welcoming Scott Frank to the stage.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this wonderful event. I'm so excited to see everybody and to be a part of this. 14 years in a row, the National Academy of Inventors has done this and keeps getting better. I want to everybody to give a big round of applause to Jamie Renee and her team for putting this event together. Amazing event. A lot of work, and they do a great job. All right, I have an opportunity to introduce our next speaker's introducer. And so I'm going to introduce someone who's going to introduce to you Erwin Gianchandani, who's with the National Science Foundation. His job is to take all the great ideas people like you have and make them a reality. And I think he's going to show you how they do it with innovation and partnerships and it really comprehensive approach. And I think you're going to get a lot from him. But what we're going to do before that is have a wonderful person come up, someone who I am privileged to call a friend and a colleague, someone who knows intellectual property incredibly well and knows how to make things happen. She's Director of Outreach for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, specializes in the Northeast region, and is just really great at what she does and really great at bringing people together and making things happen. So please welcome to the stage Elizabeth Dougherty.
Before we let Scott get away, and I hope I won't be embarrassing him by doing this, because as he's already acknowledged, we are dear friends, colleagues, advocates of IP, advocates of inventors. Scott has announced his retirement from AT&T after 30 years with that remarkable institution, that remarkable company. Scott has not only led that team, but he has also stood up the U.S. Intellectual Property Alliance. He has stood up state IP alliances, creating a network of networks of people who are supportive in providing importance and attention and creativity to the world that we all live and breathe in invention, innovation, entrepreneurship in all shapes and forms. We certainly owe Scott a debt of gratitude. Please help me in congratulating him on his retirement and next adventure. I'm glad when Anna introduced Scott, she used the term visionary leader, because Scott, just like our very own Paul Sandberg, is in fact a visionary leader. And as John Quincy Adams once said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, do more, and become more, you are truly a leader. And I think we see that both in Scott and in Dr. Sandberg and our guest, which I am going to have the pleasure of interviewing today. It's my pleasure to introduce you to someone whose work is helping to shape the future of science and innovation at a national level. Joining us virtually, we'd certainly love to have him here with us in person, is Dr. Erwin Gianchandani, who is the Assistant Director for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships at the National Science Foundation. Can you imagine what that looks like on a business card? Wow. And here he is with us on the screen today. We are incredibly sorry you couldn't join us in person. And I have to speculate, are you in that beautiful facility on Eisenhower Avenue in Alexandria, Virginia?
I sure am. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for doing this virtually. I am indeed, yes. And
Well,
you can see a little bit of the scenery behind us, in fact.
Beautiful. I am your neighbor at the USPTO headquarters, also there on Eisenhower Avenue. And we'll have to connect back on the home turf.
Absolutely.
Dr. Gianchandani, do you mind if I call you Dr. G or Dr. Erwin?
Just call me Erwin. It's all good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So we have some questions for you, but certainly if you would like to provide any opening remarks, you're welcome to do so. And I'm also going to hope that our audience will have some questions, perhaps, if time permits.
Yeah, sure. So again, first of all, thanks so much for having me today, and it's great to be a part of the NAI meeting. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. We are a little bit challenged with travel these days, but very much excited to be able to have a conversation today about the work that we're doing within the TIP Directorate here at the National Science Foundation. And really, I think across NSF more generally, for that matter. As you know, I'll just say a couple of words at the outset. You know, the notion of a Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships is still relatively new within NSF. We stood this unit up about 3 years ago, the first new unit within the foundation in more than 30 years. And we did so under the leadership of the previous NSF director, Dr. Setharaman Panchanathan, who I think will be there tomorrow serving on a panel. As a matter of fact, maybe he's there already today, and was the director here until fairly recently. You know, our vision, which I think we'll talk about, really is about doing exactly what you just said. How do we lift up everyone across this country? How do we give opportunity to every American to be able to help bridge that divide, if you will, between the lab and the market, and really bring new products and services out to bear for all to benefit from? And so I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today around how we're thinking about doing that, what some of our motivations are, what some of our mechanisms are, and so forth.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for setting the stage for our conversation today. You've just shared that the TIP Directorate, was created very recently, in fact, under the immediate past director of the NSF. Can you share some of the lead up to that creation? What was the impetus? What were the challenges or opportunities that were presented that made this the right time and this the right vehicle for success?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, when we talk about the TIP Directorate, I think that the way I like to frame it, the way we like to frame it, is there are really three sort of key motivations for establishing this unit within the National Science Foundation. You know, I think everybody in the room is pretty familiar or at least somewhat familiar with NSF, right? We've been around for 75 years. We were established by an act of Congress in 1950, the Organic Act, on the heels of World War II, and really on the heels of a manuscript that had been published by a guy named Vannevar Bush at the time for the President of the United States, essentially making the case for the role of the federal government in supporting basic research. And how that could become a lifeblood, a springboard, if you will, for the nation's economy for decades to come. And as a matter of fact, that is exactly what we've seen happen over the course of the last 7+ decades. We're celebrating our 75th anniversary here at NSF this year, and turns out. We've seen products and services like MRI scanners. We've seen ways in which we can optimize organ transplantation networks. As a matter of fact, I'm sure folks in the room are glancing at their smartphones and their tablets even as I talk. I take no offense. As you're doing that, you can remind yourself that every component of that device before you has its roots in federally funded R&D, and some of that is federally funded R&D directly out of the National Science Foundation that others, companies and others, have taken and packaged together to create the devices that are before you. So this notion of how do we unlock discoveries and how do we turn those into innovations that can fuel new products and services that can give rise to market development and economic development for the nation is something that's been around for 75 years and something that this agency has done, I think, with great vibrancy during that period of time. At the same time, I think it's fair to say that there are always inflection points, or they're always evolutions as well, right? And I think we witnessed some of that over the course of the last, and we're still witnessing that over the course of these last 5 or 10 years or so. The model that the U.S. has with regard to innovation and the innovation economy, this marriage of industry together with government, together with academic laboratories, together with national labs and so forth, the symbiosis, if you will. I think it's fair to say that that's the model that has given rise to that impact that I just described. And it's a model that's been looked at by other countries, including some of our competitors all around the world. And so if you look at the last 5 or 10 years, we've seen the competition level, if you will, with regard to innovations in breakthrough technologies, from artificial intelligence to quantum information science to biotechnologies of today and tomorrow. We've seen that competition has only heightened as we think about some of the other countries that we face out there, including China, of course. I think we would be remiss to not mention that. So that's one piece of the puzzle. I think another motivation is a recognition that, and this is something that the previous director stressed throughout his tenure at NSF. If you think about funding, if you think about innovation, if you think about the opportunities that are out there for that, I think it's fair to say that talent is distributed all across this country, but we need to do a better job of giving opportunities to that talent in every corner of this country to be able to get their ideas, get their solutions to where they could potentially have transformational impact. And so how do we go beyond the coasts? How do we think about the heartland of America? How do we really harness the geography of innovation, if you will, that exists all across this country to maximum potential? There's a second motivation for the establishment of this directorate. And then a third, if I may say so, and I think speaking to this audience, I'm sure folks would resonate with this, the fact that if you think about that relationship between the lab and the market, right, the lab to market journey, if you will, first of all, it is not linear. Second of all, I think it's fair to say that, we often call it the valley of death. It's not one valley. It's actually multiple divots, multiple micro valleys, if you will, on that journey from lab to market. And I think also one of the things that we often struggle with is we see it as, okay, I have this great idea that I'm going to push to the market, right? And I think that there's another recipe that we should also be mindful of. Not that funding great research, funding great new discoveries, funding great new investigators, and then getting their ideas and trying to get them across that valley and into the market space. Not that that's not a way to do it, but there's also a way where we can potentially bring the market to the table and build those partnerships, build those collaborations from the start, so that the research that we're enabling is in some sense informed by real-world pressing market needs and challenges as well. And so I think trying to figure out how we can do a better job of understanding what are those micro valleys, what are the gaps, and who can fill those gaps. Maybe there are opportunities for TIP to fill those gaps. Maybe there are opportunities for other agencies to fill those gaps. Maybe there are opportunities for philanthropy and the private sector to fill those gaps. How do we create the ecosystem nationally that really takes our innovation potential to the next level? Sort of that third factor that I think motivated the establishment of the TIP Directorate. I think one of the things that we're really proud of is the fact that this was a bipartisan effort in Washington and continues to be to this day. The and science package within the CHIPS and Science Act is what spoke to the authorization for TIP. It got 64 votes in the United States Senate. It's fair to say these days you get 64 votes in the Senate, you're doing something pretty well. And so the motivation has always been, how do we really move that needle for U.S. competitiveness and U.S. national security in the long term by virtue of lifting up those ideas and by virtue of filling those gaps so that we can get more concepts to the market more readily.
Well, Erwin, it's very obvious that a great deal of thought and contemplation and research went into creating this directorate. My follow-up question really plays to some of the things you've just touched on, speaking about some of the challenges and finding opportunities and ways to connect individuals that are in diverse geographies and to bring them to their individual and respective success areas what resources and support does the TIP offer to academic inventors aiming to commercialize their research, and how can they access these opportunities?
Yeah, so I guess the best way for me to characterize that is maybe just to briefly walk you through sort of the three key pillars that are foundational for the TIP Directorate.
Perfect.
We talked a little bit about the motivation for why TIP and why now. I think the next piece is, so how is TIP orchestrated? And to your point, what are some of the investments that we are really focusing on? And so the three pillars that sort of come together to form TIP, the first one is really about focusing in on accelerating technology translation and technology development, right? And that is, I think, a pillar that I hope meets a lot of the innovators in the room, or does a better job over time of meeting the innovators in the room and beyond, around understanding in that journey from lab to market, what are the market needs? What's the customer discovery that we need to be able to engender? How do we de-risk deep tech ventures over a period of time? How do we provide the sort of expertise set that's necessary to help new innovators understand the business plan that they need to put together, understand the R&D that needs to be done to really hone that concept into a product that could come into the marketplace and so on. And so to that end, when it comes to sort of accelerating technology translation, technology development, we have a suite of programs. We call it the Lab to Market platform, which starts with an understanding around iCore, our NSF Innovation Core, which is a program that we've had for quite some time here at NSF, going back 10, 12 years now, which really is focused on that customer discovery piece. And then a program for our small business entrepreneurs, SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, Small Business Technology Transfer, STTR. These are programs that we originated way back, actually SBIR, STTR, long before TIP was established back in the 1970s and 80s. NSF piloted that effort for the rest of the federal government, and now a dozen agencies that support federal research, federally funded research, invest in the SBIR STTR program as well. And that's really about taking in NSF's case, taking the earliest stage startups. I mean, these are companies that may have 2, 3, 5 employees, right? They're really just an idea coming off the shelf out of the lab, to really start to think about that business plan and really start to do the R&D to de-risk and move it down a forward pathway. I'll note that these are programs that we're incredibly proud of. In just the last few years, we've invested in SBIR, STTR alone. We've invested about $1.6 billion in 2,000 startups, and that has resulted in more than $32 billion in follow-on funding. Think about that taxpayer return, right? $1.6 billion of taxpayer money, non-dilutive funds, that has yielded more than $32 billion in follow-on funding from angels, from ventures, from other federal agencies and beyond. So that's sort of pillar number one. And we're trying to, through that pillar, also do some experimentation, some innovation. So just as we have a pathway to startups, we're also thinking about pathways for open source ecosystems as well. We've seen that open source offers competitive advantages in some trade spaces as well. It offers further innovation potential, the ability to be able to do more spin-offs and so on. And so we have a new investment specifically geared toward open source ecosystems and cultivating those that follows the SBIR model a bit as well. The second pillar for us is really focusing in on regional innovation and economic development. I think one of the main challenges that we see is investment tends to be concentrated, right, on the coasts, in big cities, in places that we often talk about, right, Silicon Valley, Kendall Square in Boston, and so forth. But there's innovation potential just about everywhere in this country. And so we have a flagship effort called the Regional Innovation Engines Program, which is really geared toward trying to provide those opportunities for folks in communities and regions that maybe we haven't invested as much in, but they have a secret sauce that could potentially be quite compelling for their economic development. The Engines program is about trying to coalesce a set of stakeholders in a particular region that they self-define, and allowing for those stakeholders to be able to say, okay, in our backyard, this is our competitive advantage for this technology space. It might be access to a mine in Nevada. It might be access to the only municipal-owned fab in the country, to our knowledge, in Central Florida. It might be access to 64% of the nation's oil and gas flows in this country in Louisiana. Those are all examples of investments that we've made, right? Trying to seize upon those backyard investments and give folks the structure and the runway. $160 million over 10 years, subject to congressional appropriations continuing, that would allow for that consortium of folks to really lift up that community and region and drive new products, new services, translation of ideas out of the research environment, as well as workforce development that can really engender economic growth for that region. And then the third pillar for us is around workforce development. Right? We spend a lot of time talking about technology translation. We spend a lot of time talking about regional innovation, but you can't do it all. You can't do any of that without the people, right? And NSF for a long time has been known as an agency that supports graduate students, and we're proud of that, right? The various efforts through research grants, the various efforts through the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, the flagship GRF program that we have, and so on. But I think that what we really want to also think about is the entrepreneurs, the educators, the innovators, right? The technicians. How do we train folks at all levels, recognizing that you don't necessarily need to have a PhD, with all due respect to any of the PhDs in the room, you don't necessarily need to have a PhD in order to have that idea that could potentially be game-changing for a sector. And so how do we provide that entrepreneurial education? How do we provide that experiential education, right? That is the third pillar that we're really investing in and thinking about as well. So I think across those pillars, and that was just a sampling of programs that we have, right? And just across those samplings, I hope you see that there are opportunities for researchers and entrepreneurs to be able to engage with us, to be able to get additional funding to help with your ideas, with your concepts.
Thank you for that. And laying it out in the pillars, I think makes it very digestible for people to truly appreciate the resources and opportunities being presented. I want to turn in a slight direction to talk about the fact that with increasing global competitiveness in critical technologies such as AI and semiconductors, and the government's emphasis on strengthening its innovation base through initiatives like the CHIPS and Science Act, how do you see the role of academic inventors evolving to support national security objectives?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a lot out there that the news media is talking about, particularly in this moment, about the academic enterprise and so on. I think that your question actually is very, very, there's two important words in your question: academic inventors, right? I think that, I hope that some folks in the room would resonate with what I'm about to say. I came out of an academic research lab, right, long before I came to NSF. I've done research, in my case, it was in the area of computational systems biology and so on, right? And in fact, one of the things that we were working on, we worked on some patent filings for that and tried to move the needle a little bit in that direction as well. I think that if we think about academic institutions and so forth, we still today often spend a lot of our time really focusing on papers and publications and conference proceedings and so forth, right? As sort of that measure of currency, as that measure of success. And yet I think the question you asked is spot on. We have nothing wrong with thinking about those papers and publications, nothing wrong with thinking about some of those foundational discoveries. NSF yesterday was proud to be a part of an event featuring NSF, Department of Energy, and the Vera Rubin telescope, and some amazing photographs of the cosmos that the telescope has taken, right? There's a lot to be taken from that experience for our astronomers everywhere. There's a lot to be taken in terms of the technology that underpinned our ability to be able to make those images a reality, stitch together more than 700 images in a very fast amount of time to create the almost kaleidoscope of what we see in the cosmos. But I think that recognition that it is that technology, it is the ability to also be able to innovate, and recognizing that as well is something that I think is critically important, and allows for academic inventors to be able to take the time to invent and to support those national security objectives, to your point, right? We at NSF, through the TIP Directorate over the last couple of years, we've built out MOUs with colleagues at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. We're collaborating with folks at what would sometimes be three-letter agencies is how they're described, right? But they also have national security challenges that can be translated into R&D questions that can yield new innovations that can then be brought to bear on their mission spaces that also have dual use cases in the market in other ways as well. And so I think the notion of twofold to answer your question. Number one, the recognition that invention in academia and other metrics of success beyond simply papers and publications should be recognized and realized. I mean, some universities are starting to move in this direction, have been moving in this direction. I think we'd love to see more of that going forward. And then secondly, I think to your point of how do we facilitate and not necessarily frown upon it, but how do we facilitate the opportunity for those who are interested to be able to engage even more closely with the national security apparatus to understand some of those challenges and then conduct the R&D around that. I don't know if I answered your question, but I hope that helps.
No, for sure. Thank you so much for that thorough answer. Erwin, we want to be respectful of your time. We can see that you are hard at work and you have a great task in front of you with the directorate. But I do have a closing question if you still have time, and that is, as we look to the future, how can academic inventors further contribute to the translation of research into tangible societal benefits, and what role do you envision for NSF's TIP Directorate in supporting this endeavor?
Yeah, so I mean, the short answer to that is we want to work with you, right? And I think that various folks have probably had various experiences with NSF and TIP over the years. NSF for a much longer period of time, TIP maybe even for a shorter period of time over the last few years. But I think what I would say is we're here, we're open for business, and we're looking to be able to support you as academic inventors to be able to see how can we best get those ideas into the marketplace. And so I would look to everybody in the room who's interested in that to engage with us, right? Reach out, engage with us. Folks know I personally have a zero inbox rule. I welcome folks reaching out, and I will direct you on to the right folks within my organization to help figure out what is that touch point that makes the most sense. What is that investment that makes the most sense for you? And actually, I should note, one of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about over the last few months, and even prior to that, has been this notion of sort of almost a common app or a common entry point where folks who are academic inventors can come in the door and say, hey, here's my concept, here's my idea, and here's where it is today. And I don't know which program I neatly fit into within TIP, right? But can you help me understand which program I might be best suited for? So how can we provide that more customized approach for folks who are looking to do this type of work? So that's something that we really care about a lot, and we are trying to figure out the best way to be able to do that at the scale that I think we need to do that effectively. So my short answer is, I think there is incredible opportunity here, and I would welcome folks really reaching out and engaging with us, and look forward to doing so that we can have more of the success stories that have defined what TIP has done in a very short amount of time, but what this agency has been able to do and this nation's been able to do for a much, much longer time.
Well, Erwin, thank you for that kind invitation for our academic invention community to continue to engage or to begin to engage with your team there at the NSF TIP Directorate. I'm sure this team is happy to be a sounding board as you develop new programs, as you develop new ways in which to connect the community to ask those questions of how they might participate, of how they might take advantage of programs and know which programs are best suited to them. I'm sure the leadership of the National Academy of Inventors would welcome a follow-on dialogue, an opportunity to keep this conversation alive.
I would love that. We would love nothing more but that. And I would say, you folks have the lived experiences. You know where the ecosystem is falling short or where we're falling short. So we welcome your ideas as well on what are those investments that can be most helpful. What are the designs of new programs that help fill those gaps that I talked about earlier? So yes, feel free to reach out, and we look forward to that conversation and dialogue. And thank you again for the opportunity to participate virtually today. Sorry I can't be there in person, but hopefully we'll be able to do that at some point down the road.
Well, we certainly are going to hold you to that, and we want to wish you and the NSF a very, very happy 75th anniversary.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.